Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for June 12th, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to have a supersized edition catching up on all the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And Slash Film writers Hoai-Tran
Hey, everyone.
and Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Let's just get into it because we have a huge list of news to talk about on the docket. And let's start off with a news story that broke on last week that we just have not gotten to, and that is that it was announced by Disney that John Lasseter is going to leave the company at the end of the year. Chris, what do we know?
So John Lasseter, who was a major creative force at Disney and Pixar, late last year, he took a leave of absence after certain allegations surfaced alleging sexual misconduct, or he never copped to that, but a story came out in the Hollywood Reporter claiming that was the reason. So he took a leave of absence, and there was a rumor a little while ago that he might be coming back in a limited capacity. And now we have confirmation that he's going to be out of Disney completely by the end of 2018. There's no official replacement for him yet, but in the meantime, Jennifer Lee, who directed Frozen, and Pete Docter, who directed Inside Out, are going to be taking over most of his duties.
Okay, so how much do you think this is going to affect the company as a whole? John Lasseter was, hugely involved in all the animated films. He was part of, the Pixar and Disney brain trust. Now that he is not going to be there after this year, do you think that this could have a huge effect on the company?
It might, but I don't want to buy too much into the legend of the lone creative force. As much as he's contributed to these films over the years, it's who's to say he's the only one who could come up with these ideas. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it's a whole group. Yeah. And I'm honestly surprised that Disney is doing this. I applaud them. Because, they could have kept him on. There hasn't been anybody that has come out in public to say, bad things that have happened along with Lasseter and sexual harassment. Obviously he admitted that there was some hugs and some other stuff. HT, should we be applauding for Disney for finally doing this?
Yeah, I think it's good that they're taking action, although I think it's a little strange that they're waiting till the end of the year and not taking immediate action after it's clear that he was, out of the role for a while. I guess they're just trying to wrap things up and make the transition even smoother. But I think it's good that they're making this decision, even though it's not exactly clear exactly what transgressed. But I think it is enough to be certain that this is a good move. I think also there are reports also of Pixar's boys club mentality, and the fact that they're diversifying by adding Jennifer Lee at the top is a really good move as well.
Oh, for sure. Since this happened, I thought they were just going to replace him with Pete Docter, and it's great to see Lee in that group. But let's move on to some other, controversy. Bryan Singer, who was the original director of Bohemian Rhapsody, was replaced late in that production. And we finally have word on who is going to be the credited director of that movie. HT, tell us about it.
So there was some contention over whether Bryan Singer, who left partway through production with 2 weeks left to shoot, and Dexter Fletcher, who replaced him, over whether the Singer or Fletcher would have the director's credit for the film. When the Bohemian Rhapsody trailer dropped, it was notably missing the director in the trailer, saying from 20th Century Fox and Regency Enterprises, where you would usually have a director's title there. So it was assumed that it wasn't quite decided yet, but it's reported that Bryan Singer will be credited as the director for Bohemian Rhapsody. So this comes after 20th Century Fox fired Singer after reported troubles on set due to him not showing up on set or clashing with actors and crew. But those were the essential reasons that 20th Century Fox said they fired him. But a few days after he exited the project, the allegations of his him sexually assaulting other people came to the surface. So it seemed like they may be somewhat related, but of course it's not exactly. The connections aren't drawn yet, so we can't be sure. But for now, Singer's name is attached to the film, and we don't know whether that will affect that Bohemian Rhapsody's reception when it comes out in November.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was at CinemaCon, they Rami Malek and who's the other director that replaced him?
Dexter Fletcher
were on stage to introduce the trailer. They premiered the trailer at CinemaCon in Las Vegas, and no mention of Bryan Singer there. It's interesting. We've learned that when a director shoots a certain amount of a movie, there's this whole Directors Guild of America process, and I'm sure Bryan Singer saw the cut of the movie and fought to have his name on it because it sounds like something Bryan Singer would do. But otherwise, I don't know. I think for the studio, it would make them a lot, it would be a lot easier to market this movie without Bryan Singer's name on it. So it's going to be interesting, when the press junket comes up and everybody's asking all sorts of questions. Do you think there's any chance that Singer's going to be available for interviews?
I don't think so. I think his name will remain attached to this film, but I don't think 20th Century Fox is going to take the risk of putting him out for the press tour, especially after the allegations were much more concrete than the ones that we're talking about with Lasseter. So I don't think that I think they'll try to distance themselves as much as possible with having him as the director, but at the same time, he will not appear, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's go to our last of our trio of controversial stories, and that revolves around the Hulk Hogan versus Gawker case. There was a documentary made about that case that premiered at Sundance a couple of years back, and now it seems like there might be a narrative feature film being made about the case. What do we know about this, Chris, and do we need a narrative feature film about this case?
Well, there's not only one narrative feature film. There's actually two different narrative feature films being developed right now. There's one called Gawker versus Thiel, and then there's this one, which is going to be directed by Francis Lawrence, who directed Red Sparrow and the Hunger Games sequels. And it's going to be written by Charles Randolph, who is one of the co-writers on The Big Short. And, all these things are telling, the same basic story about how Peter Thiel encouraged Hulk Hogan to sue Gawker over releasing a sex tape, and how the lawsuit literally just brought Gawker down completely. It bankrupted them, and they had to close their website. I don't know if we need this told in a narrative form because, like you said, there's already a documentary. There's also,
and it's a good documentary. I think it evenly, tells the whole tale and tells about the consequences and the big stakes of it. That I don't think you could probably go into in a narrative feature.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know how this will turn out. Honestly, I mean, the fact that Charles Randolph, the Big Short writer, is involved suggests that maybe they're going for that same sort of tone as The Big Short, where it's like a mix of like dark comedy and drama. I really don't know. I mean, like, I can't even picture like who are you going to cast to play Hulk Hogan? That just seems so like strange to me. But I guess we'll see how it turns out.
Okay, let's move on to things a little bit more exciting, and that is one Marvel fan has apparently seen Avengers Infinity War 43 times, actually more than that now, but he has chronicled his viewings of these movies on Twitter. We covered it, and the resulting response to that. Brad, what do we know?
Yeah, so as of June 7th, 2018, a young man calling himself Nem the Infinity Watcher on Twitter had seen Avengers Infinity War 42 times. And then his story went viral after, I think it was comicbook.com was the first to pick it up, noticing how many times this guy was seeing Infinity War. And so once his story started spreading, he was like, well, there's only one way to celebrate this. Go see Infinity War again. So he saw it for a 43rd time. And after that, once the story got even more traction, got the attention of certain parties, including IMAX, who offered him 50 free IMAX tickets so that he can continue to watch Infinity War over and over again. And then the Russo brothers themselves reached out, apparently. Well, I don't know if it was necessarily the Russo brothers or if it was just someone on behalf of Marvel or something like that, but they invited...
It was from their Twitter. They DM'd them from Twitter, so I think it was them.
Yeah, so it was an official invite to the premiere of Avengers 4. So this guy, for being, one of the biggest Marvel fans, apparently, seeing Infinity War so many times, now gets to live out the dream of going to the premiere of what will be one of the biggest movies, in blockbuster history, probably.
That is insane. I mean, a lot of people are saying, he got a ticket to the premiere out of this. But you got to consider, he saw the film 43 times before this happened, right? And that film is 2.5 hours long?
Uh-huh.
So that's 110 hours or something like that?
More than that.
That's a lot of time. Just got me thinking though. What is the most that you have seen a movie in the theater? Brad, what is the most?
For the longest time, after working at a movie theater in high school, it was a tie between Matrix Reloaded and X-Men 2. I saw them each 5 times that summer that they both came out. But then when Force Awakens came out, I actually saw that 6 times in theaters, and that is currently the record holder.
Wow, I was expecting you to beat me. When I was younger, I didn't really get to see movies multiple times in the theater much. I did see Jurassic Park 2 times in the theater. I saw it once, and I brought my dad to the theater to see it a second time. But I think that's probably the most I would see a movie in the theater when I was younger. I used to, buy VHS and DVD and, watch over and over and over again at that, on home video. But so I think the longest the most amount of times I probably saw a movie in the theater is probably also Force Awakens, which I saw 6 or 7 times in various different formats, from IMAX to 3D to 2D to film, because LA had one of the only film screenings of it. HT, what movie have you seen the most in the theater?
I don't think I've seen a movie more than 3 times, which is sad, very sad compared to your guys' records. I saw Tangled 3 times, and then I also saw Wonder Woman 3 times. But as for other ones, I can't remember much from my childhood. I probably saw Aladdin several times in theaters because I was obsessed with that film. But other than that, I don't think I've seen any more than 3.
Chris, what is your record?
I don't do movies in the theater that often. I don't see them over and over again. I think the record would probably be The Dark Knight, which I saw 3 times. I saw it twice in a regular theater and once in IMAX. I do rewatch things on Blu-ray constantly. I think I've rewatched David Fincher's Zodiac at least 20 times because I don't know, that movie is just infinitely rewatchable to me.
Yeah, I think if you added home video to this mix, I would have seen Back to the Future 1 probably, I don't know, at least a few hundred times, if not 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's Princess Bride. I definitely memorized the entire dialogue of that movie.
Brad, home video. What is the most you've ever seen?
Probably Ferris Bueller's Day Off or Wayne's World.
Yeah. It's unfair with you, though, because you just have things playing on in the background, so you probably have watched movies thousands
you
of
can
times.
do that, too. Nothing's stopping you from doing that.
I don't know. It would distract me from work, Brad. It would distract me.
You work on a higher level than us, Brad.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
I was talking about my childhood. One of the things from my childhood is on MTV, they used to have this show called, Liquid Television. And one of the animated shorts on there was this thing called Aeon Flux, which looked so unique and so interesting. And it was kind of like unlike anything I had seen animated at the time. MTV has announced that they are rebooting Aeon Flux as a live-action TV series. HD, what do we know?
So yes, Aeon Flux is coming back to MTV, but not as an animated series, this time as a live-action TV series. Teen Wolf showrunner Jeff Davis is on board to pen the script, and he will executive produce alongside The Walking Dead's Gale Ann Hurd, who also produced the 2005 feature film, which starred Charlize Theron as that's in the title role. So this is the second live-action adaptation of this series, but as you may know, the 2005 feature film was not very well received. It was both a critical flop and a commercial disappointment. It didn't even make back its $62 million budget. But hopefully, this series will have a better go at it, because Jeff Davis did his own sort of revival with Teen Wolf, which was a more gritty reworking of the campy Michael J. Fox 80s film.
I'm just wondering, the whole appeal of this these shorts to me were kind of like that visceral, it's unlike anything you've seen animated. And if this feature film, this 2005 feature film from Karen Kusama, oh my God, I can't even.
Karen Kusama.
Kusama, yeah. It can't, replicate that with, a big budget. I don't understand how a TV series could. So I'm wondering, do any of you have faith that MTV on a, MTV budget can pull this off? Sounds like the answer is no.
Well, the Teen Wolf budget wasn't that great either, and sometimes it looked a little bit flimsy, but they mostly focused on the characters.
Yeah. But I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see about this. But let's move on to Lord of the Rings. Last week, we talked about how some quotes from Peter Jackson saying he wasn't involved with Amazon's Lord of the Rings TV series. And since then, quotes from Peter Jackson have debunked Peter Jackson. We have also learned some new details on the series from Amazon. Chris, what do we know?
So Amazon Studios president Jennifer Salk has this big interview in Deadline where she talks about several big Amazon properties, and one of them is the Lord of the Rings show, and she reveals a few things. One thing that I found particularly interesting is she revealed that, even though we've been talking about this Lord of the Rings show for months now, the deal to make it official was only finalized last month, which might explain why there have been so many, wild rumors that we haven't been able to confirm, just because they really haven't nailed anything down yet. And she also says that, the general public is probably going to know a lot more about the show within a month. Specifically, they're going to be announcing writers they're going to hire and all that stuff. She also pretty much confirms that Peter Jackson is involved in some capacity. She says, right now they're in the middle of having conversations with Peter Jackson, and it's basically boiling down to they're asking him, how much does he want to be involved with the show or how little. So he's going to have some sort of involvement with the show. It's just not clear, if it's going to be a lot of involvement or just a little consulting here and there. Beyond that, she says, they're not going to be remaking the movies, but it is going to be a show that features characters that everyone, knows and loves. So it's not going to be a show that introduces a whole bunch of new characters in Middle-earth. It's going to have a lot of familiar Lord of the Rings characters at the center of it.
That is interesting, because until now I had assumed that this was going to be kind of like, backstory, kind of like that Game of Thrones prequel series they announced, where it would take place far into the past and kind of like set up the world. Chris, I know you're a big fan of Lord of the Rings. Is this something that you need? Do you need to follow the characters you know and love?
I don't know, because I'm not a big fan of the books per se. I'm a huge fan of the first 3 Peter Jackson movies. I'm not a fan of the Hobbit movies. I don't think anyone really is. So it's weird. Like, if this were happening immediately after the Peter Jackson trilogy, the first one came out, and it was all the same people, I would probably be very excited about this. But as of now, I'm not really sure where I stand. I feel like once they start announcing, the cast and who's involved writing it, I may get more excited about it. But as of now, I'm a little on the fence about this.
Okay, let's move on from one epic trilogy to another. Star Wars. E3 is going on in Los Angeles this week, and it was announced over the weekend that a new Star Wars video game is in the works for 2019 that will show the fall of the Jedi Order and follow Revenge of the Sith. What do we know about this, Brad?
Honestly, that's just about all we know. This was an announcement that was made during the craziness of E3 that's been going on for the past few days, where they're announcing all sorts of new video games. And so this is, the game is called Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It's coming from Electronic Arts and Respawn Entertainment. It's supposed to be released sometime during the holiday season of 2019. And the game itself will be a single-player action-adventure title that tells a story about a Jedi Padawan trying to survive after Emperor Palpatine has executed Order 66, where he commands the clone army under his control to kill all of the Jedi in the galaxy. It's a pretty cool idea for a game, simply because we haven't really covered a lot of the time between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope in Star Wars canon. There's Star Wars Rebels, but that takes place much closer to the events of Star Wars A New Hope than to the events of Revenge of the Sith. And this is something that will happen unfold shortly after Revenge of the Sith. So it'll help fill in the gaps. And as we know, anything that happens in the Star Wars universe now is, with regards to video games, comic books, that kind of thing, that's all canon. So this will be a story that takes place in the canon part of the Star Wars universe. I would imagine we'll see some recognizable characters pop up here and there. But yeah, this sounds like it could be a lot of fun. It's not quite as cool as the open world video game that was once in the works a while back sounded, but at the very least, it's something different than Star Wars Battlefront, which is really the only major Star Wars video game title we've gotten outside of the various mobile app games that are out there right now.
I mean, Order 66 and the killing of all the Jedi is something that is ripe for exploration, and I'm surprised that they haven't really done it sooner. And these Star Wars video games that they're producing are actually considered canon. So I'm interested to see what this adds to this universe that we know and love. But let's move on from there to Looney Tunes. Warner Brothers has announced that they're bringing back Looney Tunes animated short films to a variety of platforms. HT, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know?
So in 2019, Warner Brothers is premiering Looney Tunes Cartoons, which is a series of new short-form cartoons starring your beloved Looney Tunes characters in digital and mobile screens and broadcast. So it will not only be on TV, but it will be accessible on your phone. And these will be 100 minutes of new Looney Tunes shorts for 100 minutes per season, and it will be artist-driven, which is apparently a sort of like the angle that they're going for this series. They haven't released who the artists are yet, but it seems like this will be the next Looney Tunes series that will be coming to a screen near you.
I wonder by artist-driven if they mean that they're just going to have artists come in and tell their own story, or if that means that we'll have a variety of different styles and they won't stick to the same style guide. Do you know what I mean?
I wonder if it'll be a variety of different styles, because that would be very cool and bold for a Looney Tunes series, which is often stuck to the kind of the same house style that we've seen since the 1930s.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that they got rid of these Looney Tunes shorts. Like, it was such a kind of cool thing, and I know Pixar and Disney kind of brought back the short films before theatrical features. We don't know that they're doing that here. It doesn't say theatrical, but they say a variety of platforms. But and Disney in recent years has been bringing back those Mickey Mouse cartoons, which if you haven't ever checked them out, I think they might be, I don't know, I'm not sure where they're available, maybe YouTube, but they're fantastic and in the animation style that Brad hates. So, yes. But let's move on to Batman. I think it was probably one of the first episodes of this podcast that I, said that that Ben Affleck is probably not going to come back for Matt Reeves' Batman. A lot of people attacked me on Twitter, all these DC and Zack Snyder fans, saying I didn't know what I was talking about. And guess what? It looks like Matt Reeves might be rebooting the Batman without Ben Affleck. Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, so, it's basically been months of back and forth, is Ben Affleck playing Batman again or not? There's rumors saying he's not. Ben Affleck himself at one point said they weren't true. Ben Affleck's brother said they were true. So the other day, it was announced that Jeff Johns was stepping down as DC Entertainment president, and buried in, that story was this sort of casual tossed off line that Matt Reeves is going to be pretty much rebooting Batman all over again, and that Ben Affleck is pretty much, he's literally not going to play the character anymore. Again, this is a rumor. It could turn out to be not true, but the fact that it was reported by Deadline seems to suggest that it probably is happening, and they're going back to the drawing board with Batman. They're not going to worry about the Justice League Batman v Superman continuity, and they're going to start all over again.
This is so confusing because DC has this very successful franchise with Wonder Woman, but it's tied to, this whole DCEU that they built up, but now they're going to be replacing Batman. Brad, is this the way to go?
I mean, it's tough to say what the right way to go is for the DC Extended Universe at this point. Like, honestly, what I wish they would do is figure out a way to allow Flashpoint to reboot the entire universe and just move on and start over from scratch from there, and maybe just keep Wonder Woman somehow intact so that we don't have to lose Gal Gadot as her, because she's the best thing about the DC EU at this point. So I don't know. I mean, it's such a mess over there, and I don't know what they can do to fix it at this point. It seems like they're just trying anything and everything they can, just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks.
It was a huge hit at the box office, and when we knew that Chapter 2 was coming out, everybody was doing fantasy casting on who they wanted to play the kids as adults, and we got some some pleasant surprises there, but we've also gotten a bit of some disappointments. And over the weekend, we learned who got the last slot in the Losers Club. Brad, you wrote this up for the site. What do we know, and is this a win or a loss for us?
I'll say somewhere in the middle. It was Chosen Jacobs, who is the young child actor who played Mike Hanlon in the first It movie. He made the announcement on Instagram over the weekend that everybody picked up. He announced that Isaiah Mustafa, who is the best known as the former spokesman for Old Spice in those commercials where he was doing things like riding a horse while wearing a towel and, walking through various beach sets and things like that. He's going to be playing adult Mike Hanlon. And as we've talked about before, Mike Hanlon's role in the It series is he is the only one who stays behind in Derry, Maine, after everyone grows up and kind of moves away from Derry. And director Andy Muschietti has talked about how he's kind of changed Mike Hanlon's role a little bit as to what it is from the book. Because in the book, he does do all this research to try and figure out how to stop Pennywise and learn about the town's evil history and that kind of thing. But in this version, it sounds like Andy Muschietti is going to have that take a bit of a darker toll on him. He's like going to become what he refers to as like a library junkie. And there's been some talk about like the best way to figure out how to defeat Pennywise is to take some kind of mind-altering drugs that help him figure out how to actually defeat Pennywise, and it's going to kind of mess him up a little bit. So if anything, maybe there's a chance Mike Hanlon's role isn't as big as some of the other members of the Losers Club in this movie. Maybe he'll only be around for the beginning of it to bring everybody back to Derry, since he's the one that lets everyone know that Pennywise is back and it's time to do something about it. But yeah, so a little bit disappointing, I guess. Personally, my pick was I would have loved to see Jordan Peele come back and do this role. But if it's not a big enough role for someone of that, caliber, then maybe it works out that it's somebody like Isaiah Mustafa instead.
Yeah, and I know some people wanted, Jordan Peele or Donald Glover. I don't know. To me, the Old Spice guy seems like a step down from those fantasy choices. But I guess the first It did not have, a lot of big names. Chris, I know you're a big fan of Stephen King. What do you think of this casting?
Yeah, I mean, I too was hoping for a bigger name, but every time I get disappointed like this, I try to remind myself that the 2017's It, there was no real big names in that. The biggest name was pretty much Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, and even though I didn't know any of those actors were in that film, I still loved it. So I am a little disappointed that the whole cast isn't filled with name actors, but I'm pretty happy with how it shaped up in general. I mean, the fact that Jessica Chastain is going to be in it is a huge deal. So I'm still excited for it, even though I would have liked someone more excited for this role.
And let's move on from It to the thing that it inspired, and that is Stranger Things. The Stranger Things series from Netflix, which is very popular, is getting a prequel, but it's going to be in the form of a book. HT, what do we know?
So Penguin Random House is partnering with Netflix for a worldwide publishing deal for several books based on Stranger Things, one of which will be a prequel book following Eleven's mother. We got a little bit of her backstory in episode 8, I think, of Stranger Things season 2, and that was where we saw how she sort of became involved with the organization that experimented on her and created 11. So we'll get to see a little bit more about how that came to be and her kind of tragic story that we saw a glimpse of in Stranger Things. It won't be the only book either. That will be the only fictional novel so far, or rather novelization so far. But other ones include a behind-the-scenes companion book and a hardcover gift book for young readers. So the gift book will reportedly offer advice, wisdom, and warnings from the Stranger Things world. And those will be released in the fall 2018, while the prequel novel, which is written by Gwenda Bond, will be released in spring 2019.
I'm just wondering if anybody actually wants to know the story of Eleven's mother. Like, it seems like, people are in this series because of their love for this group of kids and also the 80s nostalgia. And it seems like this book would have none of those things. I do think that this tells us one thing, that we're probably not going to explore Eleven's backstory, at least in terms of her mom, much further in the show, because they wouldn't be giving some, novelist the opportunity to write it if there's going to be conflicting storylines, right? So it's interesting that Netflix is growing beyond the TV shows and movies, with Mark Millar's comic books and now these books. And it's also funny that Stephen King's books inspired the show, which are now inspiring new books.
Full circle.
Full circle, yeah. Let's move on to our last and final story, and that is Arachnophobia was a movie that terrified me as a kid. I haven't really revisited it since then, so I'm not sure how good of a movie it was, but it was directed by Frank Marshall, the famous producer of Back to the Future and Jurassic Park series. But now it is finally getting a remake at Amblin with James Wan. Chris, what do we know?
That's really all we do know. Like you said, this was a 1990 Frank Marshall film. It was actually his directorial debut. And now James Wan, the director of The Conjuring and Insidious, is producing a new remake of it at Amblin Entertainment, which also Amblin released the original film. And the original is a lot of fun. It's one of those movies I love, but I also will probably never rewatch because it makes my skin crawl, because it's just scene after scene of real spiders crawling over people's faces and stuff like that. And I don't get creeped out by a lot of things, but bugs do unsettle me a little bit. So I have trouble watching this film. That said, I have a feeling I'll probably be okay with this remake because I'm sure they're just going to make all the bugs CGI. Or I probably shouldn't call them bugs because I'm sure someone will correct me and say that spiders are actually arachnids. I'm sorry, spider fans out there. I'm sure they're going to CGI all the spiders for this, so I'll probably be able to handle that a little bit more. But the original, it's a lot of fun. John Goodman is in the original, and he's hilarious. But yeah, I do have trouble with that first film.
Yeah, also Jeff Daniels. A quick fact, the original movie was distributed by Disney under their Buena Vista Pictures line, which is just like, a lot of people don't think back to like their offshoots, but they distributed some weird movies. A lot of people, talking about what are they going to do to Fox, and I feel like we're going to get back to this kind of, hopefully get back to some of these kind of movie releases. But I'm wondering, part of the thing that was so scary to me as a kid with this movie was it was, real spiders and practical effects. Do you think, well, I know what you think, but I guess HT, do you think that they can replicate that creepiness if it's going to be mostly CG, creatures?
So I've actually never seen Arachnophobia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, it came out in 1990, which is 2 years before I was born. And I just never got around to it. But that's a good question. I've always been in favor of practical effects for just it always is much more, it always holds up better and it's always much more believable. But here I think they probably will go to CG. I don't know if it will work as well, but I think it's more in their budget to do so. And, we have such great CG nowadays that we have whole live action, in quotes, adaptations of just CG animals. So I think this will be fine as a CG spider monster movie.
I don't know. I want to see the actors terrified because there's real spiders, real,
tarantulas,
yes, crawling on their faces, because that would make me not want to see the movie. Yeah. Anyways, that is our last story for today. HT, where can we find more work from you online?
So you can find me every day at /film.com, and I'm on Twitter at htranbui.
Chris, where can we find your work?
I'm also at /film, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
Brad, where can we find you?
Of course, /film.com, also on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton, and check out my goofy movie podcast, Go Flix Yourself, on iTunes and other places that podcasts are offered.
You can find me at /film on all social media. You can find all the stories we talked about today on /film.com and linked in the show notes. This podcast is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to Peter at /film.com. And please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.